How did the idea of combining GIS with real-time game engines come about? And then how is this driving the rise of immersive digital twins in AEC?
If we go back and talk a little bit more about Esri's 3D GS platform, so that 3D GS platform has been advancing, it's been maturing for decades, but it wasn't really till about 10 years ago that I'd say that organizations really began investing in their 3D digital twin efforts. So in 2016, Microsoft introduced HoloLens, right, to basically a mixed reality experience where we can blend holographic data, holographic virtual information, digital information in physical space, and Pokemon.
Did you know the global digital twin market in AEC is projected to surpass $35 billion by 2027, with game engines leading much of that transformation? In this episode, I'm joined by Rex Hansen, Principal Product Manager, ArcGIS Maps SDKs for native apps and game engines at Esri, to talk about how GIS-powered game engines are revolutionizing how we plan, design, and manage infrastructure in real time. From offline access in the field to immersive digital twins and real-time data, streaming into 3D environments, Rex will share what's next for smart cities, immersive design, and decision-making at AEC, insights you don't want to miss. I'm your host, Nick Heim, and this is the AEC AI and Tech Strategy Podcast. With that, let's jump into today's episode. It's now time for our conversation of the week with Rex Hansen. Rex, thank you so much for taking the time to join the show, and welcome.
Thanks, Nick. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so this is one that's particularly interesting to me, Rex. So I'm excited to get more information on what you specifically do. So we're just going to jump right into it. So Rex, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to your role as Principal Product Manager at Esri, working on ArcGIS Maps SDKs?
Sure. No, it's a good question. So I've always been interested in maps and history and just, I guess since childhood. And as I kind of advanced into my college career, I was also interested in other things like science. So I started in biochemistry. I was actually working with at the University of Arizona as a biochemistry major and working with the School of Medicine there on a number of projects, and recognized the sort of interesting value or associations that you could make through geospatial analysis and associations, the really tracking the health of a population at different scales, or just distribution of different spatial phenomena and how that would affect human health. And that became very interesting to me while I was at the University of Arizona. And so I started investigating through electives, initially computer science and GIS and renewable natural resources. And I found really found a love for the subject, and transitioned over to focusing on GIS and geostatistics, specifically combining geography and computer science for computer mapping capabilities. And I got my master's degree at the University of Arizona back in the 90s, and the best place to go back then, and as well as today, to really hone your skills and advance your knowledge in GIS is Esri. So I got a job at Esri back in 97. I started working with their desktop products at the time. At that time, the most popular product was ArcView. And so one of the benefits of working with ArcView was the ability to not just see the sort of digital representation of geospatial phenomenon in a map or a scene in 2D and 3D, but being able to customize that through developer technology. So they had a scriptable language, object-oriented scriptable language called Avenue with ArcView at the time. So I really kind of cut my skills on Avenue at that point, had some experience in Java before that, and then kind of brought those together, and Esri released a server-based product. The internet was still in its early days, and so we built out something called ArcGIS, and that allowed us to host map and feature data and other operational logic like geocoding capabilities through services. And so some of the customization capabilities for offering those services was through Java. And so I really advanced my skills on the Java development language, both client and server side. Really found a love for developing client-side applications that could take advantage of server-side resources. And I'd say at the time, there were certainly investigations in being able to deliver 3D capabilities within the Esri system with Esri technology. They were early days, and this was really kind of the beginnings of what we might consider an industrial strength 3D digital twin. And as I kind of progressed through my developer experience there, I moved into .NET. So I joined sort of the .NET Microsoft C# world and started building out client-side applications there for web-based workflows. This is using ASP.NET, which of course transitioned into rich client apps and Silverlight. And that was kind of in the around 2009, 2010. And then at that stage, transitioned into working with basically hardware capabilities on desktop and mobile devices. So mobile devices like iOS and Android devices were coming into their own at that point in time, and being able to take this computing power into the field was exciting. Being able to take full advantage of that was something that we could do with these native development languages. At the time, working with Android Java or Objective C. Of course, Windows Phone was part of that ecosystem, and that was kind of a Microsoft side. And at that point, we transitioned out of kind of a Windows mobile approach to targeting mobile devices and more of this sort of rich mobile experience that was powered by Apple and Android devices going forward, while continuing to support these sort of high-end desktop experiences that were provided through Windows and Linux and Mac as well. And so we created something called our ArcGIS Runtime SDKs, and with our ArcGIS Runtime SDKs, those SDKs were delivered with a variety of different managed API languages, to target native application development for a variety of different platforms. Now, this is really just getting kind of our mapping capabilities off the ground into the hands of our users, of our customers and our partners, so that they could target their staff or their customers with effective applications that they could use for, basically 2D mapping, mostly 2D mapping capabilities online and offline. So that started about 2011, 2012. About that time, we began to see deeper investment in 3D capabilities, which was interesting. And so we saw opportunities in that space to take advantage of hardware device capabilities, mobile and desktop, take advantage of different enhanced rendering pipelines. And so I wanted to be part of that. And so I joined that team as an engineering lead, and then transitioned into product management because I saw that there was probably about 8 years ago, I saw that there was an opportunity here to really drive capabilities around our developer tools, not just for Esri to build out applications for our customers to use, but for our customers and our partners to build out these focused applications for both 2D and 3D workflows. And that was exciting to really take advantage of devices that were in the field. Of course, that's transitioned into a large ecosystem of other devices like XR headsets and lightweight IoT devices and embedded devices. And so, being able to take advantage of, or at least provide developer tools to unlock the capabilities that the Esri ecosystem provides has been really exciting. And so that's kind of how I got to my place now as a product manager for ArcGIS Maps SDKs, really focused on our native and our game engine capabilities going forward, and bringing to life a lot of those SDKs for our developer ecosystem, right, to build out these sort of extensive GIS client applications. So pretty exciting times. Yeah.
And it was a great summary, Rex. And for anyone in the audience that's not familiar, could you just give them an idea of the acronym GIS and then what SDK means?
Sure. So GIS is Geographic Information System. So think of it as basically computer mapping is what I often use to describe what GIS is. And so that's an informative, authoritative GIS system or mapping system that allows you to store both 2D and 3D spatial data that could be vector or raster data, and be able to store, manage, distribute, share, collaborate, analyze, simulate around real-world geospatial information. And so the GIS is designed to be able to handle being able to store, curate, manage, and distribute that information effectively. An SDK is a software development kit. So an SDK is what's provided to developers to use a developer environment to build an application, build a client application. That SDK includes things like an API that developers use within an IDE, an integrated developer environment. It also includes things like doc or samples, right, or a toolkit that allows you to enhance your mapping experience with additional components. So an SDK is really a complete package for developers to be able to take advantage of a capability. In this case, it's working with the ArcGIS system. It's being able to build out maps and scenes, 2D and 3D geospatial information in a client-side application.
It's kind of like a standing on the shoulders of giants type analogy, right? Because these developers, right, everything that you guys have put together in Esri is then essentially available for them through the SDK to then hone for their specific use case.
Yeah, very true, very true. And our ArcGIS Maps SDKs today, target web, native, and game engine developer environments. And so we are building on top of an existing developer ecosystem, whether that's JavaScript ecosystems on a variety of different frameworks, or let's say it's working with Microsoft's .NET platform, or let's say Apple's Swift technology, or working with, let's say, Google's and JetBrains Kotlin, or let's say, Flutter ecosystem. The Qt company has a Qt technology, or working with game engine, industry-leading game engine vendors like Unity and Unreal Engine. Both of them provide an immersive IDE to be able to build out, digital 3D experiences, and we bring real-world data. We bring geospatial context, we bring geospatial information from the ArcGIS system to those developer environments. And so we are building on a development environment, a developer framework that these vendors have, and in many cases, spent years enhancing and refining going forward. And so we're really adding a set of tools that enable access to, really a catalyst to enable access to the ArcGIS system, the breadth and depth of the ArcGIS system. Most of our tools are available at no cost, right? So developers can go out, get started at no cost. They can start, they can start working with our tools and working with the system generally at no cost when they're developing. Of course, we are a for-profit business, so there is a cost when you go into production at some point. And there's an extensive system that operates behind that to be able to support workflows across many industries. But our developer tools are designed for our customers, really our partners, to build out focused application experiences. We have teams inside Esri that use our developer tools to build out application experiences as well that we deliver as COTS apps, off-the-shelf applications that our customers and partners can also use too. So we do both. We provide developer tools, and then we also provide applications that use those developer tools to take full advantage of the ArcGIS system.
And I think Rex, one of the examples you had mentioned are real-time game engines.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is interesting, right? Anybody who's played a video game kind of has probably experienced some of the engines that are available, and then kind of merging that with the industry that we're in. So how did the idea of combining GIS with real-time game engines come about, and then how is this driving the rise of immersive digital twins in AEC?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I kind of left this gap right at the end of my description of how I got into Esri and how I became a product manager with ArcGIS Maps SDKs, because really the last 10 years have been really exciting, right? So in this space. And so if we go back and I talk a little bit more about Esri's 3D GIS platform, so that 3D GIS platform has been advancing, it's been maturing for decades, but it wasn't really till about 10 years ago that I'd say that organizations really began investing in their 3D digital twin efforts. What's interesting is that at about that same time, a couple of the things happened that brought the use of game engines to the table, to light. So in 2016, Microsoft introduced HoloLens, right, to basically a mixed reality experience. We can blend holographic data, holographic virtual information, digital information in physical space. And Pokemon Go was released that same year. It's entertaining, right, but it showed these location-oriented experiences for entertainment. And what's interesting is that our customers and partners that we're working with in advancing their 3D GIS system of record and working with the Esri ecosystem across multiple industries, they were trying to think about how they could use their digital geospatial information to enhance their business, right? To enhance their customers, enhance their staff workflows, so that they could communicate, they could collect data, they could collaborate more effectively. And so they saw these experiences being introduced into the market. And so, technically, these immersive experiences were founded on the use of game engines, right? To blend this volumetric holographic content with, relatively accurate geospatial location and orientation in the physical world, whether through a visor like in HoloLens or through a camera screen like in Pokemon Go. So the industry-leading game engines that were behind some of these capabilities, that were driving these capabilities, they've been building these sort of realistic but artificial worlds for years. They delivered high-powered visualization capabilities, particle systems, physics engines, and our customers across multiple industries, AEC, but also defense, public safety, natural resources, local governments. They reached out to us, right? They wanted to combine these capabilities with real-world data, right? They wanted to bring in their real-time information, they wanted to bring in the animation, they wanted to bring in the simulation workflows. And so we basically responded to the market. The market said that, we have a need. And we'd like to be able to take these benefits, the power of a game engine, we want to bring it to bear with our real-world data, and we want to bring it to life. Not just for visualization, but providing common operating pictures with real-time data, but also then using it for simulation workflows and this visual acuity that Game Engines provided and the systems they provided were ready to be used in those spaces, and they were being used for these extended reality workflows, these XR workflows already. So it was interesting to see how this all kind of came together and really started about 10 years ago. So what we did is we started working with both Unity and Epic Games, the maker of Unreal Engine. These are the industry-leading game engines in the market back then, and they are today too. And we introduced a beta program back in, I think it was 2020, that provided plugins for the developer environments for Unity and Unreal Engine and developer tools. This turned out to be, over about 2.5 years before we went into production, turned out to be the most popular beta program for a developer product at Esri that we've ever had, at 7,000 participants. We had a lot of great ideas across every industry, right? And it's actually still coming to fruition today with a lot of the capabilities that we see. I will say that what did come out of that was we did see the AEC industry or AEC firms lead the way in this space. So what we saw was these firms needed differentiation, among their competitors. They needed to capture attention. They needed to engage audiences, whether they're doing things like selling real estate, city planning, renovating, building new structures, optimizing processes in this space, increasing safety, encouraging investment. I would say that would impact things that are both financial and social at the same time. So they wanted to capture an audience. They needed a real-world digital twin to look compelling. It needed to act like it did in the real world. And so in the end, they needed the geospatial context. They needed the spatial accuracy. They also needed the authoritative system of record for a 3D digital twin, which was provided by Esri. But they wanted the immersive fidelity provided by a game engine to deliver these really valued experiences across multiple devices, whether it's a desktop or a mobile device or maybe XR platforms like headsets. So it was great to see this really come to fruition. And really, I would say AEC advanced a lot of these capabilities that other industries are taking advantage of today.
which is great to hear and interesting, because usually in the AEC space, in my opinion, we're usually like a second or third order, right? Where somebody has some breakthrough, and then we just happen to be like a second or third order participant, that benefits, right? So it's good to see us leading the charge for a change.
Impressive. Yeah, it's great.
And could you share any examples of how AEC professionals are using ArcGIS Maps SDKs today in real world workflows, particularly for planning, visualization, or client engagement?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. We've got some great examples, and we'll keep the track on game engines going here. I would say that there's a number of categories that we see success in this space with different AEC organizations or professionals being able to target these, planning workflows, these digital twin capabilities going forward. And I'd say that I'll categorize them as inspirational workflows. They meet inspirational needs, they meet developmental needs, and then they meet operational needs. So those are going to be like the three main areas. But I would see we're seeing success, and we're delivering solutions that are being used in real world scenarios. So for that first one, I want to talk about the inspirational. We've got a valued partner in Hansen. They've been working with a number of municipal governments, specifically St. Louis and the St. Louis Development Commission, on a number of projects. And one of those projects was to sort of reinvigorate or rebuild something called the Monarch and MLK, right? This is a campus for economic empowerment. It's designed to be like a symbol of transformation, kind of a rebirth of this neighborhood within St. Louis. So the city of St. Louis and Esri provided data. They had local architects within the city provide models for future structures. And then Halcyon Levine used Esri products. They used something like City Engine to ingest and refine or render structures, and then publish these as services within the ArcGIS system. But the project needed more than just this simple display of as-built or perspective designs. They needed something that was more compelling. They needed something animated. They needed something lifelike. Really needed something immersive and interesting. So it needed to generate, and it also needed to generate this production quality media. They needed screenshots and videos. They had to be able to communicate with and resonate with decision makers and other community members. So what they ended up doing is they took all of this information, and Halcyon Levine used the ArcGIS Maps SDK and Unreal Engine to deliver a focused application that had these compelling visuals, had an interactive experience that provided the community with a realistic representation of what new development would look like. And it was meant to attract and inspire the community to action and investment. They also generated a video that their political leaders within the city could use to really promote these capabilities going forward, so that there would be additional investment. There'd be not just financial investment, but social investment by the community. And so Halcyon Levine has been incredibly successful in working with communities like St. Louis to be able to deliver these experiences and really attract attention, positive attention, and impact like true change within these environments. And so that's sort of an inspirational approach. Of course, many of our partners, nearly all of our partners, are looking to generate revenue, and so these are kind of for-profit efforts. And so it's great to see that that they can deliver these solutions and inspire other communities to do similar things. So great to see the success that Halcyon Levine is having in that space. A good example of that.
Yeah, and I think that drives the point home as
Yeah,
here's a need, and then here's the actual use case by a firm.
yeah,
Rex,
yeah.
and I'll continuing on this subject of use
Hmm.
cases. So this is a question that hits close to home for me. So a lot of AEC projects operate in remote or constrained environments. Ours is parking garages, right? Either no signal, terrible signal, just not the best places for the exchange of data from the field back to the office. So how do your
Right.
SDKs address the challenge of offline access to rich geospatial data in these contexts?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a basically a value proposition that we have with the ArcGIS system and our native and our game engine SDKs. I'll focus on our game engine SDKs here, but it does impact both. So the ArcGIS system as a whole, as a complete comprehensive GIS, right, supports the ability to generate things like local cache files of 3D data. This includes things like object and mesh with attributes. You can generate terrain, elevation, vectors or feature data, imagery, and all of these, as part of the system, you can either take offline distinctly, you can take it offline on the fly, you can generate these local cache files, these local files, and access those within our ArcGIS Maps SDKs for native apps as well as game engines, so for Unity and Unreal Engine. So the Maps SDKs contain logic that support this extensive collection of coordinate systems that are supported by Esri. This is something that we've invested in Esri, for decades, and that is the ability to work with or establish really a context or a canvas that represents an accurate location within on the world, and it allows you to be able to store data and be able to overlay that data accurately, both for global or geographic space or local or projected space, right? So the geospatial context in a game engine for a scene or a level, that would be Unity or Unreal Engine, can be established and utilized by multiple layers that are maybe coming from different sources, could be online and offline. And so just to reiterate, we do support local access to geospatial data sources, which enables these offline workflows. Of course, we've got more work to do in that space. We need to support taking, let's say, like a full scene, which is kind of a recipe for presenting multiple layer types, and taking that offline as a whole, whether pre-planned or on demand. But we do see organizations being successful in that space. I guess one organization, this kind of goes back to, I said inspirational, developmental, and operational. The operational aspects of being able to work with data offline or have that ability to work with data offline really points to an example I have with Port of Corpus Christi and the Acceleration Agency, where Port of Corpus Christi is looking to modernize their site for management or operational use with living digital twins. They really, what they needed to do is they needed to migrate their decentralized, really non-standard means for managing geospatial information. They had a lot of old, out-of-date systems. They needed to put that into a modern GIS system of record, and they decided to build on top of ArcGIS. So they worked with one of our partners, the Acceleration Agency. They needed to build out a visual compelling experience that would work in the back office, but also in the field. And so they decided to work with the ArcGIS Maps SDK for Unity, and they built an application called the Overall Port Tactical Information Center, Information Computer System. It's called Optics for short. And it's designed to provide this common operating picture, right? This single source of truth for all personnel involved with the port, specifically those that are monitoring and securing the port, right? So this app is designed to showcase this 3D digital twin of the port. It includes things like docks and buildings and refineries. It displays active vessel location, movement of ships using transponders on the ships, security incidents in real time. So the application is used on Windows desktops in the harbor master's office and command centers. But there's actually a mobile edition too. That's one of the benefits of working with the game engines. You can target multiple platforms. It's a true cross-platform environment. And so being able to build out an application for mobile devices was key, because their port security or staff in the field may or may not be connected in a place where they're connected. And so they needed to be able to provision their geospatial information to be able to be used offline or used in really sort of connectivity restrained areas. And so that was enabled through our game engine SDK, our ArcGIS Maps SDK for Unity. But Unity itself as a game engine provided this really high fidelity visualization, right? It brought the scene to life. It brought things in like realistic water effects, animated 3D models of ships and cranes, interactive alerts, right? So it made it easier for staff to interpret what they're viewing. And that's the key, is that it looked similar to the real world. And so they didn't have to abstract from like, a 2D symbology and try and read the legend to figure out what they're looking at. Things look like they do in the real world. And so staff didn't have to be an expert in cartography to understand what's happening. They could see what was happening in their interactive, their living digital twin experience through their Unity application. They could make more informed decisions, right? So it was great, and they could work offline in that same scenario. So it was great to see that going forward. Of course, they're looking to enhance that going forward too, and they're looking at things like predictive models and geospatial simulations, but that's more of a future, sort of a future approach.
And Rex, that is a really nice example and well put, because we call it recognizable reality. It's the like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to look at a set of plans to be able to know what's in front of you. It just works. And
Yep.
it's beautiful because you don't really need much more than basic training, and then it just pops up on your device and you immediately know what you're looking at.
Indeed, I agree.
And Rex, going back to game engines, and
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about CAD, right? So we'll get into the CAD and BIM discussion here. So how are tools like Unreal or Unity evolving to integrate real world sensor or IoT data? That's Internet of Things for anyone unfamiliar. And how does that improve clarity and communication of engineering data compared to traditional CAD or BIM?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really kind of a industry transition in this space, right? So, in short, transitioning from things like yeah, paper and pen to computers, and then when you're working with computers and digital information, you're transitioning from 2D to 3D, and then in that space, you might be transitioning from like static 3D models to dynamic 3D environments, right? And so the idea here, I think, is ultimately to try and reduce this abstraction required by users of a GIS and a digital twin, and working with building information effectively in those 3D environments, right? So they need the 3D environment to look and act more like the real world, so it's easier to understand. Interpretations happen more quickly. Decisions can be more well informed. So you asked about Unity and Unreal Engine. So I mentioned before, these are both industry leading game engines, right? So they've invested years, some cases decades, into building these high powered visualization experiences, these developer environments. They've incorporated things like physics engines, particle systems, animation capabilities. In some cases, they include things like asset libraries. They provide this photorealistic, this immersive real world experience, and that's a great foundation, right? And really, what's interesting there is that as industrial strength developer environments, they do have the ability to bring in heterogeneous sources of data, and they can render and display and animate as needed. What they really needed was they needed a real world geospatial context, or a canvas, in which to represent the precision that was required to accurately work with real world data. And then they needed the ability to easily access geospatial data sources, right, that represented things like structures and terrain and imagery and features. So in order to do that, kind of bring these two worlds together, Esri, we worked with Unity and Unreal Engine. We helped introduce and build a foundation for the use of this high precision real world data, established by Esri, with access to multiple sources of ArcGIS data through services or packages, so online and offline. Right, so game engines brought the high fidelity visualization, the animation, the other systems to bring the real world data to life and see it in action. Yesterday, today, tomorrow. Basically, we brought the ability to work with real world data in an authoritative way. Right, work with the system of record that stores and enables the ability to use 3D data effectively. The game engines brought in things that could apply effects like weather simulations, like simulating things like pedestrian traffic, or other scenarios to get cost-effective results more quickly. The key is that we need to provide the authoritative foundation for that, right? The nice thing here, the key is, I talked about earlier, moving from 3D kind of static 3D models to dynamic 3D environments. What's key about the game engines is, because of this investment they've made in these systems to make a world more realistic, it's not just a snapshot, right? It's operational, it's alive, and so the game engines enable that capability, and we provide the solid foundation, GIS foundation, on which to operate.
And Rex, speaking of things that are constantly changing, let's talk cities and public infrastructure. So we've heard this idea of smart cities becoming more tangible as time and the technology has advanced on. How do you see GIS and game engine integration supporting city scale digital transformation, especially in public infrastructure and planning?
No, that's another good question there. I think just to reiterate, I see GIS providing the spatial intelligence. I see game engines delivering this immersive experience, right? So if we combine those, we put those together, specifically for cities, we can generate basically these living digital ecosystems, right? The ecosystems that can be planned, they can be monitored, they can be improved collaboratively, in some cases in real time. Um, Maybe an example of this when we're dealing with city scale transformation, infrastructure, and planning is something we're doing, something Esri is doing right now. We have a product called ArcGIS Urban. So ArcGIS Urban is designed to streamline urban planning workflows around things like creation, analysis, the impact of plans for urban areas. We What's interesting is that that's a primarily a desktop or flat screen experience, but we want to provide a more immersive experience for urban planners, decision makers, to be able to see what they're evaluating, what they're building, what the decisions need, how the decisions impact other structures around them within urban environments. And so we've started a private beta program at the moment that showcases something called Urban XR. Right, Urban XR is an application. It's built with Unreal Engine. It's designed for customers, for urban planners to really author a scene in a browser. They can bring in building data, they can bring in terrain and imagery, they can add vegetation and furniture, and then they can use Urban XR to visualize it in an XR headset. And they can visualize it in an XR headset as a virtual tabletop experience with like small scale urban scenes with intelligence, so you can tap on things and get information about what you're seeing. Or you can view it at full scale, at ground level, right? And you can explore the digital world as if you're there. What's nice about this is that it's not just evaluating, for the author, but also being able to create presentations and collaborate with others in that same space. And so being able to present to other decision makers that maybe don't necessarily have the same technical skill, but of course they have the authority to make policy and decide what needs to happen and when and where. But being able to visualize those experiences more effectively by providing an immersive experience and collaborating with those stakeholders is important. And so that's something that the Urban XR application provides as part of the ArcGIS Urban suite of products. That's an example where this has a specific application within the AEC space and urban planning workflows. Ultimately, it's really about providing, as an application, it's really about providing this more compelling, like an intuitive, immersive, like impactful, I'd say like a useful experience for participants. And so the game engines combined with the latest visual platforms, such as visual platforms like XR headsets, even things like stereoscopic monitors, right, that provide depth, really enable our customers, our partners to deliver that experience for their constituents. And so that's an example of a scenario where Esri is using game engine technology to be able to target urban planning experiences going forward. Now, granted, those experiences probably transcend industries, right? So there's other scenarios where being able to build out a virtual tabletop experience, collaborate with others that are making decisions around a common operating picture, or they're planning for a mission or something like that. So obviously, defense and public safety and other scenarios might also be valuable to be able to take advantage of those immersive experiences. But if we're just talking about urban settings and city scale digital transformation, we see value in this today to a point where Esri's investing in those immersive environments to build out turnkey applications to be able to deliver those experiences. So
And Rex, what I heard there is what also transcends industries is equipping decision makers who may or may not be technically savvy in the context of GIS, the game engines, and AR,
exactly.
XR, VR. Giving just right that recognizable reality, get it in front of them, help them
Yep.
see the visual data in 3D that they need to see to then make decisions as needed.
Exactly. I think just that, reducing that abstraction, like I talked about before, and being able to understand what they're looking at and the changes that are being proposed, or the opportunities that are being proposed more effectively to make those decisions more quickly, I think is ideal, right? Reduces cost, increases productivity. What's interesting here too is that a lot of times we see these engagements not just with decision makers and policymakers, but with community members, folks that are going to be impacted by these experiences. I talked about Halcyon Levine before. They've they've got a number of different endeavors there. We're reaching out to communities to be able to get feedback, on new developments, redevelopments in spaces. So it's not just, council members or developers. It's actually the folks that are going to be using those systems on the ground. And so providing that immersive experience really is attractive, I think, for those constituents to make, to provide feedback, which is great. So.
I know and I've seen this in a limited capacity, but use of augmented reality, right? Whether a headset or an iPad or it's like, we're going to make changes to this corridor, and you can have a community meeting and you can literally see as close to, just as close to reality as possible, which I think is really impactful, again, because
Yep.
black and white plans don't mean too much to the layperson, but speaking their language visually does.
Yeah, right. Something that looks realistic and operates like the real world is certainly more compelling, right? So,
as long as you've got a pair of eyes, a working pair of eyes, which thankfully most of us do, it can click.
Right, exactly.
Rex, what trends or emerging capabilities in GIS and immersive technology are you most excited about in the next, say, 5 to 10 years in the AEC industry?
I would say there's a couple of trends here. I'd say this increasing integration between GIS and BIM is really going to help drive immersive digital twins across industries, right? So not just for AEC. I would say that that means partnerships like the partnership that we have with Esri and Autodesk are going to help drive those endeavors. Some major players in the GIS and the AEC space are going to help drive those capabilities. So for AEC, this means things like streamlining workflows around communicating new building and community construction, engineering, redevelopment. Includes things like how do we move materials effectively? How do we increase safety? How do we simulate scenarios and plan for the future? Right. Ultimately, being able to add more intelligence and this greater integration between GIS and BIM workflows, and a lot of that again driven by Esri and Autodesk, is going to inevitably help reduce decision time. It's going to reduce cost. It's going to increase value. And so as we begin to enhance the underlying core foundational capabilities and technology there to deliver these immersive, intelligent digital twins, I think that'll be important. I'd say if we talk technically, there's some things that have started to come online, like visual positioning systems, or VPS, just better connectivity, things like 5G systems, more pervasive 5G systems, and other techniques that will provide this industrial grade precision for mobile devices in the field. And this will allow for this more intuitive inspection and collection workflows. And this is so that devices off the shelf, that you can buy basically, iOS phones and tablets, working with Android tablets. You don't need a Bluetooth enabled, GNSS device that costs thousands of dollars to get an accurate location orientation. You can use devices that are in the field that you can buy off the shelf, and you can use technology that we provide, technology that is provided within a system to get a better position and a better orientation. And so I think that'll be very important as we begin to see these things come online. And it's not just public visual positioning systems. It's also being able to generate your own and store your own private or secure data for visual positioning systems going forward. So being able to feather or combine those together is going to be important. I'd say something that's new as well, high fidelity 3D data capture technology. It's going to provide with better assessments of what's in the field and be able to store that information, so it's a foundation for some. That might be a foundation for some of these positioning systems, but certainly for visualization. And that kind of trails into, obviously, AI is a hot topic, and being able to combine AI and geospatial allows for the ability to interpret data more quickly, classify and assess changes, and then deliver. Working with data, working with location, and utilizing AI, be able to predict what's going to happen in the future. So you can plan for the future. You can forecast what's happening before it happens. And so you get a better handle on maybe the wear and tear on an area, or maybe situations that may involve emergency response or potential problems that could occur, and capture those before they happen. So I think that'll be important too. So that combination of AI and geospatial for assessing changes and predictive analytics is going to be important. And really kind of the last part, and I did talk about a little bit about extended reality, or XR, in the past. So we've seen some great advancements in the headset space with high fidelity pass through recently. If you look at things like the Apple Vision Pro, or looking at the latest edition of Vario's XR4, which are really high end devices, they offer nearly optical, near optic quality screens. They're fairly expensive, and they're not really quite wearables yet. But I'd see that given where the technology is going and how some of these capabilities are going to be miniaturized and delivered more effectively, I'd say in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll start to see like true wearables with the ability to overlay, I'd say, geospatially accurate volumetric digital data. We still need that hardware, though, to catch up with our imagination. I think we've been imagining this for quite a while, but I think we're now beginning to see that kind of the light at the end of the tunnel. So give it 5 or 10 years, I think we're going to start to see some of those wearables. They're going to provide that level of capability. So I think those are about 5 areas where I see emerging capabilities and a lot of opportunity in the next 5 to 10 years that'll affect AEC specifically. So,
Which, and I think, we know with the rate of change of particular technologies today, 5 to 10 years can seem like a while off, but it can also happen in the blink of an eye, right?
it happens fast, right? Believe me. Yeah, exactly. I think I'm starting on almost my 30th year at Esri, and it still feels like I just got here. So I'm just kidding, but it's a lot of opportunity, a lot of excitement. So it's amazing how fast time flies, though. Unfortunately, so
Absolutely. And Rex, this has been a pleasure for me as I continue to learn more about GIS and what you guys at Esri do and your kind of different verticals. But what final piece of advice can you give to AEC professionals who want to stay ahead in the evolving landscape of geospatial technology and immersive design?
yeah, yeah, kind of a future view on kind of what's important, where to focus your time, where to focus your effort. I'd say from what I've seen, I would look at investing in like a flexible industrial strength GIS. And that GIS, as I mentioned before, is designed to capture, store, deliver, analyze a wide variety of heterogeneous geospatial data. So maybe in short, make sure your foundation is solid. Make sure your data is 3D GIS ready, right? So the idea here is that no one really likes it when their data doesn't line up. It doesn't show up in the right place. Make sure it does. Build on a strong foundation. Build on an enterprise capable industry grade GIS. Of course, I work for Esri, so I see what we're doing every day. Of course, we could provide that geospatial foundation, that authoritative system of record. But I've seen it, I've seen it come to life over the years, and we're ready, to be able to handle that. It just relies on customers capturing and making sure that the data that they're capturing is ready to go into the field and is available at the precision and the accuracy that's necessary to light up these 3D GIS experiences. That's one aspect. I think technically, I'd start, looking at growing your knowledge in game engine technology, right? The immersive systems that they deliver and they continue to move forward. It's not something that those industry leaders with Unity and Epic Games and Unreal Engine, they're, they're continuing to advance their technology going forward. And so we need to be aware of what's happening there. And I think from a technical perspective, if you're unable to grow internally, reach out to partners, right, with expertise, or reach out to other entities that have that expertise to combine your GIS capabilities, your needs, and focused application workflows with the power that game engines provide. So what's important there too is really understanding those workflows, right? So look at others that have achieved success, and then push boundaries in that space. Just keep learning and use game engines to their, start using game engines, and you'll see some of these capabilities really come to life. I'd say maybe the last part there, and this is something that I've seen just in a number of engagements with customers and partners, is you can stay curious and you can continue to experiment. When it comes to delivering experiences for use in production, I like to promote the crawl, walk, run approach. So when you're introducing new experiences in organizations, that can be a challenge. Certainly for staff that are used to traditional workflows and they just want to get their work done, right? So what I recommend is, don't overwhelm them, right? Introduce this technology in a way that shows an initial return on investment, right? Get their buy-in and then start to enhance going forward. You want to make sure that you're seeing progress, iterative progress, especially for folks that need to use these capabilities or these technologies in the field that aren't necessarily, looking at, they're not necessarily excited about technology. They just want to get their work done, right? So I suspect most people listening to this podcast, they like to push the technology envelope, which is great. I like that, right? But we're often designing solutions for others that aren't so excited about changing the status quo. So we have to kind of think about that as we introduce some of these new capabilities and make sure they're useful for a broader audience. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and that's really well put, Rex, and I can relate particularly to being somebody who is very excited about the proposition of technology, but is not always met by others. So it just, and hey, and that's okay, because we need to design for that in mind. But Rex,
Yeah.
thank you again so much for taking the time to join us today. If the audience wants to, follow up any of the topics we discussed today or just connect, what is the best way for them to reach you?
I'd say reach out on LinkedIn. I'm available on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. Send me a message if there's some questions that you have, or you'd like to talk about maybe a solution or a project that you're working on or want to work on. Reach out. Let me know. LinkedIn's the best way at this stage. Yep.
Rex, thank you again so much for taking the time. It was a pleasure.
Thanks again, Nick.
Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you will find a summary of key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering and technology endeavors. Thank you.